Sometimes it's a lot easier to stay in the discomfort or even the pain that we know rather than stepping into an unknown territory, even if that may be the best thing for us, right? If we know that that healing process is going to lead to the very thing that we desire, which is that peace, which is that certainty, which is that inner sense of security, which is that inner sense of love and worthiness, even if we know that the journey is going to lead there, sometimes it feels so much easier just to stay exactly where we are, to stay in the places that we recognize most. And therefore, this is the reason why most individuals find it difficult to heal and in some cases choose not to heal because it is a choice, right? Let's get it out of the way. Sometimes we think to ourselves, well, somebody's just been through so much trauma that they simply cannot heal from that traumatic experience or those series of traumatic experiences within their lives. And I can empathize with that. I understand where that logic would come from, right? Surely they've been through so much that there is no way out. However, all wounds heal. That is a universal principle, right? We've seen it with our own physical bodies. It doesn't matter how large, that wound may be. It doesn't matter how infected something may be. As long as it is nurtured, taken care of, and is treated in the right way, it will eventually heal. It does not matter what it is. Even a broken bone will eventually heal. And this is the very same principle that shows itself when it comes to internal emotional healing, or what we call the inner work, right? However, it is always a decision made by ourselves to get out of the way and to allow that natural process to happen. It is our decision to let go of that identity that we've known for so long. Like, I ask the question to myself and those that I love most. I say, who are you without blank? So who are you without the trauma? Who are you without the struggle story? Who are you without your story? Who are you? Right? Most of us would think, well, I'll be free, I'll be liberated, I'll be peaceful. Sure, that might be it at a conscious level, right? Those might be our desires, but at a deeper level, what we recognize is without that story, I have no identity, or this identity that I've known and called myself no longer exists. Without that struggle story, I may no longer know where I would get my sense of security, right? If I've been finding security in other people's validation or other people's acceptance, their positive attention, if that's been my source thus far, what am I going to do when I no longer have the story that gets me that attention, that gets me that affection? What am I going to do without my struggle story? What am I going to do without my pain? What am I going to do without the woundedness, right? If all my life I've been using the wound as a means to gain positive affection and attention from others, who am I once that is healed? And that's the question we really have to wrestle with when we're getting into a state of finally accepting this healing, this internal healing, right? When we step into our healing journey, it is not just, this honky-dory, jump right in, kumbaya type of moment. At least it's not for most of us. For most of us, it is a difficult decision to make. And it's always a decision that's difficult because that is inherently the healing process, right? That jumpstarts everything. Like, I believe it's 49 to 51% of the way. Just making the decision that you want to heal, making the decision that it matters more for you to heal and to get to a space of wholeness than it does to stay in the place that you have known so far, in that old identity that you have essentially called yourself. When you make that decision, life begins to change and you see things start to happen for you and propelling you into that growth, propelling you into that healing. Everything starts to move in accordance. But before you make that decision, it feels as if you're in resistance with the entire world. It feels as if life is literally against you. And this is not the case. That's never the reality. Life is always looking to bring you into your greatest good. It is only that you are in resistance to that greatest good by keeping that story locked in, keeping those same thought patterns and those same emotional patterns alive within yourself. And I can empathize with this because that was me for most of my life up to this point. I didn't want to let go of what I knew. It was more difficult for me, or I felt it was going to be more difficult for me to step into an unknown, even if it meant I would experience peace, rather than holding on to the pain that I understood or that I had familiarized myself with, that even become addicted to, right? That those feelings of worthlessness, those feelings of inadequacy and shame were so familiar to me. They were so close knit. They were so commonplace that anything other than that would be a place of quote unquote discomfort for me, right? And that's how backwards our conditioning is. We can be in a place where we're in absolute pain Yet we familiarize ourselves with that pain, and so we stay within that pain. There's this analogy or the story about this dog, who's seen outside like the city walls, and this dog is out there every day, and he's just crying out, crying out, crying out. And people walk by this dog and walk by the dog, and they ask themselves, what is going on with this dog? And some of them eventually stop to look at the dog, and they see that there's a nail in the dog's paw. And sometimes the owner's there, sometimes he's not, right? I don't know what the owner's doing away from his dog, but that's a question for another time. This is a story. So sometimes the owner's there and people ask like, man, why does the dog not just, move from the nail? Or why don't you just remove the nail? And the owner said, well, the reason why the dog will not move from that nail is because it doesn't hurt enough. The pain is not severe enough to where he feels he has to completely remove it from his paw, right? Again, it's a story. Like the owner should have been the one responsible for taking that thing out, but I don't know how the dog was going to do it by himself, but that's not the point. The point here is there are times in our lives when we are in a state of pain, we're in a state of suffering, but that suffering, it acts as comfort. It acts as assurance for us, right? Whatever we're gaining from that feels like a greater gain than the pain that we're experiencing. And this is hard for some people to fathom, like especially when you see somebody in, let's say, an ailment, chronic dis-ease per se. Some individuals would rather stay in that state of dis-ease than they would in a healthy state, because that state of disease gets some attention, it gets some affection, it gets some approval, it gets some validation, it gets some sympathy and empathy, it gets them, people tending to their needs. But as soon as that dis-ease disappears from their life, those things may be gone. They may no longer get the positive attention of other people without having to do much, right? And so it is easier to live from that space than it is to live in a space where you're no longer getting those perceived needs met by the external world, which is, it's a failing recipe to begin with. It's futile, right? If you're looking to the outside world to affirm, to validate, to give you a sense of identity, you're SOL. For anybody who doesn't know what that means, make sure to go to Urban Dictionary. You will know exactly what that means. So yeah, this message was a straightforward, very simple message, which is when you are embarking or making that decision to step into your healing journey, just understand that that conflict that you feel, that resistance that you feel, that is a normal part of the experience. And it is actually an indicator that you are finally doing something different, right? When that old identity is fighting to keep itself in place, when the ego is freaking the hell out and needing to establish itself, that's a sign, that's an indicator that you are now stepping into a new version of yourself. And again, it is not complex. It's not something that takes a genius. You don't have to read 100 books to understand the process. The process is already within you. Just like all healing, the instructions are within you. It's just making the decision that I am willing to let go of what was in order to step into what is or what can be or what will be, really, right? There's so much beauty in this life. There's so much to experience. There's so much power, so much, so much peace, power, and prosperity, as I call the 3 Ps. There's so much to be had, but none of it can be really enjoyed or even experienced so long as we hold on to that past. And that's a decision that we have to make for ourselves. And at first, it's a moment by moment decision, right? It's the choice that we make right now and the next moment. Am I going to choose to continue to entertain this thought process, or am I going to allow myself to step out of that? Am I going to choose to entertain this relationship dynamic, right? Am I going to continue to place myself in situations or circumstances that represent the old version of myself, the destructive nature of myself, or am I going to step into that constructive, proactive, and empowering version of self? And that's a decision, again, that can only be made by self. Nobody else can do that for you. In the same way, nobody can lift a weight for you in order to gain a muscle for you. Nobody can do this inner work for you. Nobody can make these decisions for you, right? They may be influential in your experience. They may have guidance or some sort of advice that will lead you back to yourself. But when it's all said and done, that's the most that anybody else can do for you, including myself in this very moment. The most I can do for you and the best I can do for you is to lead you back to yourself. It's not to try to hold your hand or to try to, force your hand at this inner journey, at this inner discovery, at, embarking upon what they call the shadow work and facing and confronting those aspects of yourself that you've been so afraid of for so long, when it's all said and done, it's going to be you and you. And there's no greater freedom, there's no greater empowerment that comes from this journey than realizing that you're the one in control of it. Yeah. Yeah, this message right here was it's one that's close to home for me because, you know, if I had known this earlier, obviously it would have been so powerful, but the fact that I got to experience it and learn it throughout the journey has been one of the greatest gifts for me, to know that it is my choice to step into this. However, making that decision will also mean that there's going to be that resistance on the other side. There's going to be that friction. There's, you know, a part of me that wants to stay, that wants to establish itself, that is afraid of what is to come. That part of me that felt it was protecting me for so long, that may want to just settle in and may want to deepen its roots at the moment it realizes that I'm now making a transition. And so, you know, don't be so hard on yourself. Don't be so mean to yourself during this process. Look to be kind to yourself, to be gentle with yourself, to have grace for yourself. And that will go a long way. Trust me. A long, long way. You'll need it. So that being said, before I wrap up, shameless plug of my first published book in life, Doing Me Guilt-Free, Breaking Free from People Pleasing and Unleashing Your True Personal Power. Make sure to get yourself a copy of one of these immediately by clicking the link in the description below. Look at that little spit. Look at that. Something else. By clicking the link below or the link that I pinned into the comment section. But for now, namaste and namaste.